Hello, Chalk Dusters. Thanks so much for joining us again. We're thrilled to have you with us, both of you. And this is Katie, on location this week from Spain. And I'm with
DTM, hello everyone. Great to be with you again after a very busy week down under.
Absolutely and happy February. Thank you so much for all your comments that you're putting on the website. And thank you for your likes and shares and subscribes. Keep on coming. We're thrilled to have you with us at the end of this very exciting week. So, DTM.
Where better to start than yesterday's women's final that we got up for on our rocky ferry?
Yes, we have really pulled the plugs out this week. We're on a ferry from Portsmouth to Santander. I feel like we were there for 3 weeks. Very force 10 gales. But the highlight was the tennis, wasn't it?
It was. They managed to get TNT Sports on the TVs in the lounge, so we were able to persuade them, with the help of the remote, to find the right channel. We were the only two, weren't we, at 8:30, but by 9:30, how many were watching?
Oh, there must have been about 15, I think, by the end of it. And we did have to switch TVs at one point because it was health and safety that you had to actually tell everybody that there was a force 10 gale on two of the screens. So we were moved to another screen. But hey ho, you're not here for the storms, you're here for the tennis.
And you're quite pleased, aren't you? Because Elena Rybakina not just proved to herself and all her team that she was back right at the top of the game, winning her second slam in her career, but you picked her.
Well, yes, she's in our fantasy tennis, in my fantasy tennis league. So I am now, I think, joint top with another pal who I'm sure is listening. Hello, Lisa.
After one event, 3 events to go, 3 more Grand Slams to go. But yes, that's very impressive. And I think DTM has to take a pat on the back as well.
Go on then, what for?
Well, in the previous episodes, I highlighted all the ingredients and the key factors that were going to contribute to the most likely winner. And I did pick Rybakina to make it through from the bottom half. And Sabalenka, being most people's pick, made it to the final as well. But starting with their big serves, those two really got to the final pretty unscathed. And so it was really a shoot off, a bit like the gunfight at the OK Corral on BBC Two, for those of you that used to watch black and white movies.
We're not as old as you, not everyone.
Okay. But yes, it was very much a firepower from the off. And the final 6-4, 4-6, 6-4, Rybakina took the glory, but quite a lot to unpick.
She did take the glory and she was great. And I loved the way she was so calm because we're doing ferry talk today. She was the mill pond of calmness, whilst Sabalenka was the force 10 gale of ups and downs. And you could tell how she was feeling every second, whereas you really couldn't read. Very professional, very, very.
Yes, it's interesting, having heard a lot of pundits and a lot of people talk about the final. I was trying to see if they kind of picked out the things I noticed, and they did in part, but these are the sort of summary takeaways for me. The mentality of the two players you've just mentioned, Rybakina's calmness, a bit almost Borg-like, and I feel Sabalenka in those big matches likes a real fight. She likes another personality to take on. She likes to increase her grunt if the opponent's grunt gets loud. She likes to shout, "Come on," and get in the opponent's face if they're shouting, "Come on." If they start hitting the ball hard, she hits it harder. And I felt that she was just getting nothing back from Rybakina. And she was a little bit kind of lost, especially in that final set as her lead started to dwindle. She was looking at her team. She couldn't really
Mm.
get that kind of mud fight with the opponent.
Like in the semi-finals when the umpire called Hindrance, she actually thanked her afterwards in the post-match interview, didn't she? She said, "I was so cross about that it fired me up to win, and there wasn't any shenanigans coming from the other side of the court."
And so what it left, I think, was her own head. Sometimes people talk about the chimp, the voice in your own head. I think she was just left with that voice constantly talking to her, and she couldn't escape it. And the reality was that I think one of her team even had the word mentality written on their face as a sort of
Yes,
aide
okay.
memoir that Sabalenka, just to say, keep your mind on the job. I don't think she had a problem with her tennis. It was very much too much of her mind on the job, and she was overthinking and thinking 10 to a dozen about why this match wasn't sort of going her way by the end. Now, for me, Sabalenka's always had a checkered history of conversion rate. So being in a lot of finals and even more semi-finals, always there in the Grand Slams near the end. But her actual winning percentage rate is very low. Last year, she won 25% of her tournaments she entered, 4 out of 16. That's across all the tournaments that she played in.
Which for a number one in the world is quite low.
Yes, and in terms of Grand Slam finals, she's now 4 from 8, 50%, not too bad, but in the finals she's lost, she's been in winning positions, and she herself has admitted that on at least 2 occasions she's thrown the final away, and you could add yesterday to it. So it wouldn't be too harsh to say she might have won 7 out of the 8 finals, but when you really look at it, she didn't play a bad match. She just didn't really get a grip when it really mattered towards the end of that 3rd set. She seemed to just disintegrate, not visibly in terms of any one particular moment, but just a series of points that just went Rybakina'S way. And from 3-love up, it was 5-3 in a blink of an eye. Lost Sabalenka's, which gave her the not too a lot of women don't relish the idea of serving for the match. A lot of the time they struggle with that. But Rybakinā stood up there and played a really good game.
You could see it in her eyes. You could see she was loving it.
Closed out that game with 2 cracking ground stroke winners from love 15 to go 30-15 up, and although Sabalenka made her play every ball and got back to 30 all, she stepped up and hit almost 2 aces. Certainly the first one was unreturnable, and she won it with an ace.
Brilliant. I will give Sabalenka the Queen of Style crown, though. I did sit there and, just add a little bit of fluff. I did sit there during the final and think, are the people at Yonex looking at each other thinking, what on earth did we put her in? Because there was Sabalenka. I mean, her outfit, she looked great. She was very stylish and very, she looked like she chose what she was wearing. Whereas little Rebecca, bless her, she looked like she was in sort of peasant's weeds. She had Yonex head to toe, racket included. And, there's nothing wrong with that. But I don't know. The Yonex people must have thought, did we not realize this was going to be a really big thing? We could have put her in something that other people might want to wear. I can't imagine anybody looking at what Rebecca was wearing and thinking, well, I know what, I'm going to go out and get that.
It's amazing because I cannot think of another professional tennis player, male or female, that wears Yonex clothing. If you said badminton, lots of players wear Yonex, but in tennis terms, they all use the rackets. Many players use Yonex as a racket, especially after the technology changes about a year ago when Madison Keys came on the scene with the new Yonex racket and then won the Australian Open. A year on, the numbers that are using Yonex racket, especially in the women's game, is significant. But
It's
she's the only one with actually footwear and clothing.
I've seen somebody else wearing the footwear because it's got a signature on it, hasn't it? And hers has obviously got her own signature on it, and I think I've seen somebody else wearing the shoes with the signature, which I didn't think was particularly cool, but hey, who am I to know? But I did think the slightly week-old nighty look was really not the look that you should be going into the women's finals wearing. I really hope that the Yonex people have quickly got their sewing machines out and designed something a little bit more cool for her next outfit. That's
She's
tennis.
not such a small in stature. I was gonna mention the fact that Elena Rybakina is the 4th tallest player on tour at 1 meter 84, and Sabalenka is only 2 centimeters behind the 5th tallest professional on the circuit at 1 meter 82. And I think their serves are the weapons which really set the standard for others to try and emulate, and having the height is a big advantage.
The
It
ankles work
really
better, don't they?
these were the couple of takeaways which, in addition to what I said about Sabalenka's mentality, when you're watching the top women of that height serving really well, the reason they get their first serves in, and Rybakina serve was 55% successful yesterday, but a lot of the time when she was missing her first serve, it was because her ball toss was slightly lower than it needed to be. The tension through the arm, her release of the ball left that ball slightly shorter in terms of optimum height. And when the racket is at full extension and the ball toss is going up and just reach that point where the ball hovers, it's not going up or coming down yet. If you get that in the right place at the optimum height for the racket to almost like a smash, isn't it, at point of impact, smash through, um, then the serve tends to be successful. And towards the end, I willing her coach to get your ball toss up, keep delivering that ball toss in the right place. And that made a big difference on occasion between the sort of end and the first part of the third set, the end of the second set, and Sabalenka was getting on top, and especially on the second serve, you saw Rybakina hitting lots of kick second serves, and Sabalenka was taking the double-handed backhand and hitting clean winners down the line. Rybakina needed to improve her first serve percentage towards the end of the match, and she did, and it was all down to the ball toss. In terms of Sabalenka's takeaway, I would really encourage her to use the forecourt. She used to play doubles. We're going to talk doubles shortly. She used to play doubles very successfully, Grand Slam winner at doubles back in 2019. She dropped the doubles, but she can play at the net. And I think she needs to use the forecourt. When she brought Rybakina in with short
Mm.
balls, Rybakina hated being at the net.
Great rally though, wasn't it? I think I can only remember one. And it was a great fast rally, which of course she won.
Yeah, rat-a-tat-tat, 2 or 3 volleys in a row, and then
Mm.
Sabalenka hit the final volley past Rybakina, but 2 or 3 times she would play like a short shot, not quite a drop shot, but just a slice short shot. Rybakina had no option but to come in, and she really wasn't comfortable. So for me, Sabalenka can win and can get on top of Rybakina because for a lot of the game, she was slightly ahead, but she didn't really have a clear head certainly in that third set, and she lost her way. And well done, Elena Rybakina.
Mm. Well done. And we're going to move on and talk about the women's doubles.
Yes, we mentioned Elise Mertens a few times, one of our friends on the tour. We've sat and watched her a few times at Wimbledon and in Shenzhen, I think we said last week.
Yes, absolutely. We follow her we're always with glee, and she is number one in the world for women's doubles.
And it has just got back to that position, having won the Australian Open women's doubles with another friend of ours, former Chinese number one singles player, Shuai Zhang.
Yes. And they just looked like they were getting on so well. The chemistry on court was amazing. And it was obvious. Everybody was mentioning how they just gelled so well. They play so well together.
Yes, and they've formed their doubles team again. They used to play together a few years ago very successfully, but then when went their separate ways, which does happen with doubles teams, they freshen up. A change is as good as a rest. It's not always because they fall out, it's just simply a new dynamic. A lot of the players will end one season, have a conflab with the partner, agree to go their separate ways, try out a different partnership. Katerina Siniakova, a Czechoslovakian, uh, another top doubles player at the moment, used to play with Barbora Krejcikova, the Wimbledon and French Open champion. They were the number one doubles team for a number of years, and they parted their ways. And Katerina Siniakova now plays with the American Taylor Townsend. They're really the other top doubles team in the women's game alongside Mertens and Zhang, but they weren't so successful in Australia this last week. And I just wanted to mention a shout out to Olivia Nichols, who's the highest ranked British female doubles player. She's currently ranked number 26 in the world. And we were talking about earnings a little bit. So, Katie, let's talk about the prize money. You've dropped singles, you're prioritizing the doubles, you're playing with Elise Mertens. How much are you going to win having prioritized the doubles?
Well, now we have talked about this before. And from memory, I think it was around 10% of the earnings if I was playing singles.
Yeah, you're not far off. The exact percentage people can work out there, but it's between 10 and 15%. So roughly to the nearest million, the singles champion is getting close to $3 million, £3 million at Wimbledon. I think it was 2.8, give or take, $1 million at the Australian Open. As a doubles team, you have to share the prize money. So I'm assuming you would share it 50-50, Katie, unless your backhand slice drop shot made a difference.
I would have negotiated that pretty hard first before we started. But yes, I would have gone 50-50.
So Elisa Mertens and Shuai Zhang won just over $600,000 a pair. So they would split that. So approximately 300,000 each for winning a Grand Slam doubles title.
And that's if you think about it, that's on top of your singles money, which you've won, and all of the costs are the same. So adding the doubles is really quite profitable, I suppose.
Yes, and there's been a lot of singles players, maybe not the very top of the game, but certainly players like Miran Draver has played a lot of doubles in recent years. Going back, Coco Gauff, Jessica Pegula used to be a formidable pair. More and more, some of the top players are now abandoning the doubles just to stay as fit and healthy for the 7 singles matches that they hope to play to win the singles at a Grand Slam. Doubles is worth keeping an eye on. Olivia Nichols, 31 now, and she is was unlucky a little bit. Seeded 12 at the Australian Open, but came up against a strong pair. Storm Hunter was one of the opponents that beat her and her Slovakian partner, Mihalikova. That might not be quite right,
Easy for
but
you
it's
to say.
Mihalikova. But Teresa and Olivia were seeded 12, but they lost in the second round. And I checked on her lifetime earnings, and she, having got a degree in sports science at Loughborough, has been a professional doubles player since 2017, and she earned coming up to $1 million in 9 years. So that shows you the
Gosh.
contrast with all that travel. Not a lot of loose change there, is there, after costs?
No, I'd say that you'd need to paper round as well. But moving on, we're going to cover a little bit, well, wrap up the AO with takeaways from the AO 26.
So what do we think of the third week? So this bigging up, starting with this first week, which normally traditionally has just been qualifiers for the singles event, but now we've got this third week with a lot more razzmatazz and obviously the 1 points.
The third going in at the beginning.
Yes, so
So
slightly back to
three,
front.
one, two, if you like.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, everybody loved it, didn't they? It really came off really well. The 1 point slam was great, and it then encouraged people to be more interested in the qualifying rounds.
And then we had the walk-ons, the press conferences, the interviews on the court, the interviews behind the scenes. We had the drama of the cameras behind the scenes and Coco Gauff smashing her racket, all the stuff, off-court stuff. Players'
Yeah.
social reach, how important their social media, their followers. We're thinking of Naomi Osaka's impact, the Coco Gauff I've just mentioned, and even talk about Serena Williams coming back. She managed to get her name mentioned even before Rybakina'S final. So what do we think there, Katie?
I think probably I feel for the women and the men with the intrusion of the cameras being everywhere. Think, I know Coco Gauff slightly blamed, she'd lost and then she sort of had a bit of a blow up about the cameras. But I feel for them. Apparently, underneath AO, there's a warren of alleyways and walkways for the players to walk around. So unlike at Wimbledon, where you can see the players walking around, especially on the outside courts, they've got this sort of tunnel system up there. But there are cameras everywhere, and I'm not sure what the benefit of that is for the players and for their mental health. They need to feel that they do have some time when they're not being watched. So I have sympathy with them for saying, can we just have a little privacy sometimes?
I agree with that. I think some of the players have a big PR team that's working on their behalf. I think that the proper time to discuss how those cameras work and where the balance is drawn between players' privacy and exposure for fans to see all aspects of their professional sort of wares and how they get to court, what they're doing behind the scenes, their training. I think having that relationship with the fans is important. I think for me, Coco Gauff had a very disappointing loss, and then this story came out.
Mm.
I think then Iga Swiatek chipped in, and for me, the players like to have control over the narrative, and sometimes it would be nice that the fans and the people who are supporting the sport get thought of maybe as well. So finding that balance is important, I think.
Yes, but I think it is about control of it, isn't it? Because they're all putting things all over their Insta, but they're not putting bracket smashing and negative things. They're putting positive things. Whatever we think of them bringing their jewelry range into their tennis or whatever else they do, but they aren't putting that's quite negative. It's quite intrusive. And I think it's the Australian Open sort of saying, well, you've overstepped by giving us so much of your background through your own Instagram, then we just feel like we can make hay and set, well, not sell, but promote these type of clips for our own social media reach. And it just didn't seem very supportive of the players.
Okay, good. And I think we just have to mention the hindrance call, which came up in the semi-final. The hindrance was called out on Sabalenka, so she lost the point because if the umpire feels that you do something, whether it's verbal or physical, that then affects your opponent's ability to play a shot, then the point can be awarded to the opponent because the umpire, in their opinion, it's a hindrance call. So in the example of Sabalenka, she hit a ball, she claims it was a miss hit, so her normal grunt was then followed by an extended sort of additional sound, as if
Yes.
like an embarrassment screeching sound. It's like, oh crikey, that ball's gone off flying.
Husband that this was ball was clearly going to go out, is what the umpire thought.
Yes, and the ball spun back into court rather than looking like it was going long, and so at that point, the umpire intervened, thinking that her sound had gone on for far too long and therefore put Svitolina off. Whether you agree or don't agree with Sabalenka or the umpire's opinion, they obviously had to agree to disagree. The umpire's decision has to be final.
Absolutely, and so it should be, and, the only sadness was that it seemed to be that, well, I'm not sure if it's a sadness, but it just seemed that it actually spurred her on because she likes a bit of argy-bargy.
Yeah, but what was interesting is Sabalenka said, "Can you watch it again? Can you review it? Because in
Yeah.
my opinion, you're wrong." And I think rightly, regardless of behind the scenes, what the referee and other officials thought, you really have to stick with the umpire there, otherwise you're opening a can of worms.
Well, exactly, that was like the Felix shot with Jack Draper where the umpire clearly called it wrong, and Felix kept on saying, "Go on, just have a look at it before." But, anyway, we're not talking about men's tennis, we're talking about women's tennis.
Yes, but I think a lot to take away from the Australian Open, and I look forward to the French Open, Wimbledon, and the US Open incorporating some of the successful features that we've enjoyed the last 3 weeks. And now the players move on. Australia, the Australian swing has come to an end. And do you know where they're heading off to now, the players?
Well, they're all on the way, well, they've arrived in the Middle East, haven't they?
Exactly. All the players that lost in the first week, a lot of them headed out to the Middle East, where the Middle East swing takes place. And all the players that did really well at the Australian Open, they're putting their feet up.
Because as you were talking to me today about this in the drive, and it's to do with the WTA contract the women players to play a certain number of 1,000 point, um, tournaments. Is that right?
They have to play the biggest events. So the four Grand Slams, and then they have to play the 10, I think it's 10, it might be 12 WTA 1000 events, and then they have to play, and they can pick and choose. It's a bit like pick and mix. They have to pick out, I think it's 6 WTA 500 events. So the very top players don't need to go near the WTA 250 events. For example, there's one in Romania happening this week where Raducanu is the number one seed. Well, the Rybakina'S of this world don't need to worry about that level. They're not obliged to play that. They can if they want, but their schedule has to be 20 events unless they either pull a fast one or are genuinely ill, injured, and
Okay.
withdraw
Okay.
for a recognised reason.
And the main reason to get there quickly, the main reason to be in the Middle East now easily and without stress is that you've lost early at the AO. So you've got time to get there.
Yes, so the biggest event this week is a WTA 500 event, and that's the Abu Open. And Rebecca was on the entry list, and Boko was on the entry list, now pulled out because,
Because they did so well at the AO.
yes,
They don't need the points.
and there's been some late withdrawals because players are either injured or just not feeling it. And they may make up a genuine issue, or they may make up something which is sort of a bit tenuous. And I'm sure sometimes players state a reason for not playing that they wouldn't for a Grand Slam because they want to play the Grand Slam. And there are contributory factors. So sometimes the timing of withdrawal means you get your prize money, and if you leave it too late, you only get half your prize money. So there are other factors that feed into the timing of a decision. But this week, Belinda Bencic is the number one seed. She's defending the title in Abu Dhabi, and of course, she lost very early at the Australian Open to a qualifier. So she'll be nice and fresh. And Alexandrova, and both these two players, Alexandrova's number two seed in Abu Dhabi. Also, she lost in the first round at the Australian Open. Both these players are on the cusp or just Bencic, I think, is number 9 in the world going into this week. Alexandrova, number 11.
So they're both trying to get into the top 10.
Yeah, they're trying to get some points, although Bencic is defending the 500 points she won last year. The player I would look out for this week is Clara Towson. She's the number 3 seed. All the seeds in a small draw of 32 players get a bye. Towson is already in the last round of 16, so they only have to win 4 matches to win the Abu Dhabi Open, as opposed to 7 to win the Australian Open. So a big difference there. Four good matches, and Towson's got a big game. Just lost to your player Mboko in the third round in Australia, so probably a bit more form coming into this week than a lot of the others.
And we do realise, dear listener, that it is pretty hardcore to be listening about the Abu Dhabi Open after the AO, but stick with it and you'll enjoy it. And and you'll know so much more about it by the time we get to the next exciting Grand Slam in France, in Paris.
Yes, there's a few weeks in the Middle East. So following Abu Dhabi, we are in Qatar and then Dubai. And Qatar and Dubai are bigger events. They're the WTA 1000 events. So by the time we get to Dubai, some of those competing for the title, Sabalenka, Rybakina, Andreeva, Iga Swiatek, some of them will have gone out over there to play in the Middle East. But we've got basically February in the Middle East.
Lovely. And now we have our spot of Game, Set and Search.
Yeah, who's on the up? Well, Elena Rybakina jumps back into the top 3 in the world after gaining those 2,000 points for winning the Australian Open. Last year, she got to the 4th round. This year, she won. So really a difference of about 1,750 points difference she's gained on last year. So she's swapped places with Coco Gauff. Rybakina at number 3 in the world. And the other big mover, Elena Svitolina, after a semi-final run, is back inside the top 10 and is now, after quite a long time, having given birth to a child, Gael Monfils, she's finally returned inside the top 10, having had a
Which is
break outside
pretty
it.
impressive, isn't it? Very impressive.
Very impressive.
And Game, Set and Reset. We've already mentioned one of them.
Yes, Coco Gauff. Watch this player. I'm worried for Coco. Now at number 5, she won't get a top 4 seeding, which means at the big events, she'll meet one of the top 4 players guaranteed at the quarterfinal stage. That makes life a lot harder. She's got to win those 3 in a row that I talked about. Only 2 or 3 players had won 3 in a row against the top 5 or 6 players in the world. Coco Gauff has now got that challenge guaranteed unless she can rise back up the rankings. And to do that, it's going to be very difficult for Coco Gauff because she's the French Open champion. So the surface she's likely to do the best on, the slower surfaces, she's got all the points to defend. So I expect her ranking might drop further.
So she's got some pressure on her.
Yes, and another all Americans that have got to reset, Sophia Kenin and Emma Navarro, small in stature players who've done very well in the past, but their rankings are falling. Emma Navarro is now at number 17, and Sophia Kenin, Grand Slam champion, won the Australian Open in 2020, reached the French Open final. She's now at number 27, and both those players are struggling to win. They haven't won more than 1 match in isolation at the start of this year. And I think both those players are in fairly big trouble because their serves are very vulnerable. So having been in the top 10, those two are falling, declining, and they need to try and work out how they can maximise some wins against these bigger servers.
Oh, well, I'll cheer them on for a bit this week. See if it helps.
Sadly, I think Sophia Kenin has already lost at Abu Dhabi as we speak. So
Oh
yes,
dear.
difficult road
And
ahead.
finally, dear listener, we've got for you the player of the week.
Yes, that has to go to Elena Rybakina. We both highlighted her in different ways as being the most likely to take the title away from Arena Sabalenka, and that's exactly what happened. I was delighted for her because she, for me, is evolving the game. The last 12 months, the likes of Amanda Anisimova and Elena Rybakina, along with Arena Sabalenka, for me, are a bit like how Boris Becker changed the men's game back in the 80s with his serve. The top of the women's game are now playing a different style of tennis to the rest. And it's, for me, it's almost a bit like the tech. I get very dated with tech, even though I think I
You
know how
do.
to work around the computer.
But
Um, but you get very dated. You think you're right in amongst it, but things are evolving around you. And I'm going to be fascinated to see if more and more players really work on the serve, are much more aggressive with the second serve, and look to basically copy and incorporate more of the what I'm going to refer to as the top table of women's
ah,
tennis into their own game in an attempt to break in.
the top table, people, is a blog which DTM wrote for the website this week, which you may well want to have a look at if you're really interested in the sort of who would you invite to your tennis dinner party, really. I would have all sorts of people, Henry VIII, various other. One day, maybe we'll do a whole pod about that one day. But yes, Dan was talking about his tennis top table for women's tennis, and that's on the website.
Yes, if you had 4 seats at the table, who would have a guaranteed seat? And I wrote this blog last Wednesday, I think at the quarterfinal stage, and I said in my blog, which is on
Just dot your
yes, on our website, shortbusmedia.co.uk, I talked about Arina Sabalenka having a guaranteed seat at the moment. I talked about Elena Rybakina having a guaranteed seat, and the reasons for those two are all based on statistics and tennis reasons, which is highlighted in the blog. So the likes of Iga Swiatek, people screaming out and saying that she's the Wimbledon champion. Read my blog, and you'll see why she doesn't get a seat ahead of those four.
well, or comment and say why you think that they do get the seat right.
But it's a good game if you're on a long journey like we are currently in the car or on the train, and you like your tennis. Who would you sit at your top table? Your best 4 players on current form, not past glory, current form.
Love to hear from you.
So that brings us to the end of this week. We look forward to finding out who's going to conquer the Middle East.
Thank you very much for coming on our ferry ride with us. Next week, we will be in our destination in Spain, probably with some excitement from the Spanish Alcaraz fans.
Anyway, it's goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me. Thanks so much for coming along on our ride.